Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of I'll Meet You There by Heather Demetrios. This is a YA contemporary story that follows Skylar, and she lives in a small town in California that is very kind of run down and out of the way, and she just feels very trapped. And she is looking forward to escaping after this summer. But she also is kind of conflicted because she rekindles a friendship with a guy named Josh who was a couple years older than her and was away in the war in Afghanistan, and he's come back as an amputee. And their kind of budding, blossoming friendship slash relationship and everything going on with that. So that is what this whole book revolves around. So first off, I'm going to talk about the world building a little bit. Typically speaking, I don't talk about world building within contemporary stories, but because this is a very specific setting, I want to talk about it a little bit. I ended up really enjoying this. I was not expecting anything from this. I didn't really know a ton going into it, besides a lot of people said it was a really good, angsty contemporary romance. So I liked this setting because I feel like we don't get to see a ton of this. This is a small town that is very poverty stricken. The main character lives in a trailer park. A lot of people have drug addiction issues, and there's a motel that she works in that is one of those very eclectic, eccentric hotels where each hotel room has a different theme, and it's very kind of kitschy, but it's also kind of run down. And a lot of things about it, like, it just very much spoke to hot summer nights and these very small towns that, if you're familiar with them at all, have this kind of their own culture, and like it's like a weird microcosm, and just the way that people in these small towns interact with one another, the way that people get stuck in these small towns, the way that a lot of these issues and like social issues just kind of circle around and exist in families and stuff. So all of that was done really well in here, and you could really feel that. I had no problem picturing this town whatsoever. Next, let me talk about our characters. As far as Skylar as a main character, I'm pretty neutral on her because there's things I really liked about her and things I really didn't like about her. I feel like I really enjoyed, like I said, the whole thing that she was dealing with poverty. There's times where, and it's real poverty, there's times where she couldn't eat, where she was eating just like a can of ravioli a day, and it was very much like, oh, now I'm so poor, but like she's literally broke, has no money, they can't pay their bills, that level of poverty. So that was an interesting thing because I feel like a lot of times you have these characters in either YA type movies or YA books that are like, there's no parents and we're all fine, we have plenty of money to do all these things and go on road trips and do all this fun stuff and go to shows and whatever. And this is not this character's reality, which was very different from what you're used to seeing. I will say that she still had a lot of the typical YA contemporary and even new adult contemporary tropes. She is this artist type character. It's something that I see a lot in YA contemporary, these like artsy characters. She makes collages, and I think I've read enough books about artists that like the whole collage thing just didn't really hit me. I've read contemporary books that have artists like sculpting and painting and stuff that really resonate with me and that made me want to do this art stuff. And with her, I was kind of like, it kind of is this like, oh, she does this weird thing, she does this weird collage thing, and it was just like, I didn't really feel any kind of way about that. Also, she is the typical virginal straight edge character, which you see over and over and over again in YA and new adult romance, and I'm so sick of seeing it, especially because we have the main guy character, the love interest, being like the bad boy. And I'm just so sick of seeing these girls that feel like they can't hold their own, that are at a disadvantage, that at least they feel because they're virgins and because they don't have any experience, and, you know, they're at these parties and they're like, I don't drink and I'm just so left out and blah, blah, blah. Although that is a real thing, that these people, that real people like this exist, it's something that is shown so often in romances and YA romances and new adult romances, this good girl versus the bad boy that like kind of reforms him in a way, and it's just, I'm really sick of it. It leaves a really, really bad taste in my mouth, and I just hated seeing that yet again. I mean, she does have good reason for being the way that she is as far as that, like, as far as not doing any kind of like alcohol drinking or anything, not doing partying. It's because her family has a history of that, so it makes more sense than some other ones might, but it's still the same thing in a different package, and it just, I don't like it. I don't like it. It makes me just mad to see, and I just don't like it. As far as our love interest, I'm super torn on him. So he's a character that you do pull for, and he's written well, but at the same time he's written well, and that makes him kind of a douchebag. So he is this typical small town stereotypical guy. He at least says homophobic slurs, and I'm not sure if he says any racial slurs. I think he's at least around when some racial slurs are said. And it's super off-putting. And it is, yes, it's realistic. People in small towns in these kind of like, it's depicted like, it's like a backwater, you know, small town kind of thing. People do talk that way. At the same time, you can't try to make your love interest like likable and having him say like homophobic slurs over and over again, you know? And yeah, like army people, army dudes say stuff like that. This kind of like bro culture. I get that it's like a realistic depiction of like that certain kind of character, but it doesn't make him likable and it doesn't make you want to pull for her being with him. And she's the only character really in any of this, when people are saying any kind of slur, she's the only character that really says anything about it and kind of speaks out about it, but it's very minute and it's not really brought up again and there's no real change with it. So she'll say something like, oh dude, you shouldn't say that, or, you know, can you not, or whatever. But it's like one line and then no one really changes, and like I said, he keeps doing it throughout the story. I don't think there's ever a time when he's like, oh wow, that's really shitty, I shouldn't do that, or anything. And there's times where you're in his head. He has very small chapters where you're kind of in his head, and he still says it, and he like calls his friends pussies, and it's just kind of like, can we not though? Can we not though? And I was hoping to like him more as a character as far as everything he was going through. I do kind of feel like his story and his PTSD amputee kind of story was used a tad bit for tragedy porn. I'm on the fence about it. I'm not sure. It's not as bad as a lot of like new adults where they have a lot of like tragedy porn in it. But I do kind of feel like he's used as this like pitying thing. I don't think you're supposed to feel like that, but I kind of feel like it just wasn't achieved as well as I would have liked. As far as their relationship, I end up still pulling for them, regardless of my feelings about them. There were moments that I was like really pulling for them. There is some like miscommunication stuff, which I'll get to in a second, but overall I liked their dynamic, but I think I'm going to end up finding them forgettable over time. So lastly, I'm going to talk about the plot. It is your very typical summer kind of, you know, will they, won't they, what is she going to do, she wants to get out of this town, how is he going to recover from all these issues that he's having with like PTSD and everything, etc. There is this miscommunication plotline that happens a couple times too, which is kind of frustrating. I don't like that, and especially with this, I mean, it gets resolved fairly quickly, but it's just that one like, you know, are you with your best friend? No, I'm not. I saw you with him. It's just like that stuff. And I'm not a super big fan of this miscommunication plotline thing that happens in a lot of YA, contemporary, and new adult. So, yeah. I do think that this book will be good for people that like this genre. I've talked about numerous times before on this channel that I'm not the biggest fan of YA contemporary, but I ended up reading it as like palette cleanse books between like heavier fantasy stories. It's just kind of what I do, and I do gravitate to them more in spring and summer. So I will be continuing to read them, but they're not my favorite. But if you like love YA contemporary stories, I think you'll enjoy this. It's a little bit of a different one. There's different kind of dynamics and things going on. But overall, it just missed the mark for me in a couple places, especially with some of the characters and just the way that they were acting and just their lack of development, really. So I gave this one 2 out of 5 stars. I'll Meet You There was my Patreon book pick for the month. So every month on Patreon, my Patreon supporters get to vote on a book they want me to read for my TBR to read and review that month. So this was my April pick. So thank you guys for picking this one. It's one I've been meaning to get to for a long time, and you guys finally gave me that push to finally get to it. So thank you guys again. If you want to pick a book for me every month on Patreon, the link for that will be listed up above. So comment below and let me know what you thought of I'll Meet You There. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all you guys soon. Bye!